So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining me virtually today. You are all here for Introduction to Foundation Directory Online. So I'm Caitlin Seifritz, the Nonprofit Services Supervisor at the Regional Foundation Center, and I will be leading today's workshop. I am also a certified Foundation Directory Online trainer and expert. So before we get started, I did want to go over some logistics. So we are recording today's session. And I will email out the recording within 48 hours. Unfortunately, I'm not able to share the slides as they are provided by Candid, which I'll speak more about in just a minute. However, we are going to be sharing a link to a resource guide in the chat, and that guide has links to the information included in today's workshop. And if any other resources get mentioned or people have questions that aren't included in that guide, then I will be sure to update the guide. And when I email you all the recording, I'll also provide a link to that guide as well. If you are having any issues or questions, please use the chat feature. My colleague Jillian will be monitoring the chat box. I will be also stopping a few times throughout the presentation to see if we have any questions, but feel free to add your questions as you think of them. Everyone is currently muted just so we can keep background noise to a minimum, but at the end of the presentation, I will allow people to unmute themselves in case they have specific questions that are more complicated than they can type out. And then lastly, at the end of today's session, I will be providing a link to a survey. So we would love to hear your feedback about this workshop or any other workshops that you'd like to see us present in the future. So I see that a few people have added where they are, what organizations are representing today. So that's great. Feel free to keep adding that into the chat if you would like to share what organization you represent. So for any of you joining us for the first time, I did want to share a little bit more about who we are and what we do. The Regional Foundation Center has been serving Philly's nonprofit community for almost 50 years. We provide access to high quality research databases, free workshops, and one-on-one research appointments. So while our appointments and our workshops remain virtual, we are excited to welcome you back into our space. So we are located at the Parkway Central Library on the ground floor within the Business Resource and Innovation Center, or BRIC as we like to call it. So our space offers comfortable furniture, free Wi-Fi, and meeting rooms. Currently, we are open Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So if you're looking for a change of scenery from your home office or cubicle, then I hope you will stop into our space and say hi. Sorry about that. So I did just want to briefly mention some of our upcoming workshops in November. So starting next week, we are going to be offering our Diversify Your Funding series. So that is a 3-part series, which includes 3 introductory classes. The first one being Introduction to Fundraising Planning. The second one is Introduction to Corporate Giving. And then the third one is a new class that we have never presented before called Introduction to Individual Giving. So while what we're talking about today is really focused on finding grant funding for your organization, it's really important for organizations to have a diverse funding stream. So starting to think about other ways you can support your organization beyond grants. So the series is a really great opportunity to explore some alternatives to grant funding. So definitely check out any of those classes. You're welcome to attend all of them or 1 or 2 of them, whatever interests you. All of those will be recorded. So if you're not able to attend the live sessions, still register for the workshop that you're interested in and you'll receive a recording to them. Also on November 10th, we will be offering our Ask a Nonprofit Expert sessions. And the topic for this month will be marketing and social media. So if you have any questions related to your organization's marketing plan or how to get the most out of social media, this is an opportunity to meet one-on-one with an expert consultant to go over the questions that you have. And then lastly, we offer free headshots in the BRIC. So on the 1st and 3rd Thursdays of the month from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., you can stop in to get a free professional headshot. So there's no registration required for those, just drop in anytime during those hours. And you can check out our website, freelibrary.org/nonprofit, for additional information about our workshops and registration. So many of you may have heard of Foundation Center and GuideStar before. Well, these two nonprofit organizations merged in February of 2019 to create a new organization called Candid. As leaders in the world of philanthropic data, the merger of these two organizations means even more data being collected on the philanthropic sector. So even though they're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of this merger, I still like to mention it just because sometimes you might still see reference to GuideStar or Foundation Center, and then also Candid. So just wanted to explain that all of those things are essentially the same organization. What does this have to do with the Regional Foundation Center? Well, we are part of Candid's Funding Information Network, which is a network of libraries, community foundations, and nonprofit resource centers across the globe where you can access databases, print materials, and free classes. So we get our materials for our intro classes from Candid, which is why I'm not able to email the slides to all of you. But in that resource guide is a link to a handout which covers some of the highlights that we're going to be talking about today. All right, so upon completion of today's training, you should be able to do the following: explain what Foundation Directory Online is, identify your needs before searching in Foundation Directory Online, evaluate if those prospects are a good fit for your organization's needs, identify options for accessing Foundation Directory Online, and learn where you can get help with Foundation Directory Online if you need it. So you may see reference or may hear me use the shorthand FDO. If you hear that or see that, I'm just talking about Foundation Directory Online. All right, so before we get started, I do have a poll question for all of you. I just want to get a sense of where or how you are all currently searching for funding opportunities. So I am going to launch this poll. So you have a few different options. You can click any and all that apply. You're also welcome to share additional things in the chat as well, something that isn't represented in the poll. So go ahead and take a minute to fill that out or to share something in the chat. All right, I'll give people another 15 seconds or so to either use the poll or to put something else in the chat, and then I'll share the results with all of you. All right, so I'm going to end the poll and share the results so that you can see where other people on today's workshop are looking for funding opportunities. All right, so it looks like we have a tie for first with funder websites and RFPs. That makes a lot of sense. We also have some people using Google and GuideStar, and we have one person who's already using Foundation Directory Online, so that's great. Then it looks like we have a couple of things that came in through the chat. Lots of referrals circulating in our network. That's wonderful. Definitely tap into your network, see if anyone has any leads that they can share with you. And then we also had somebody share that the board sends funding opportunities that they're aware of. That's awesome. Getting your board involved with fundraising, especially if they know somebody at that particular foundation, is a really great way to uncover some funding opportunities that your organization might not be aware of. All right. So today we're really going to be focusing on Foundation Directory Online, but part of our search will also kind of touch upon 990s, GuideStars, and RFPs. So I have another question for you. We're not going to be using the poll for this. So instead, please use the chat box and share any challenges that you face when searching for funding opportunities. So just take a minute, share any challenges that your organization or you personally find when you're searching for funding opportunities. Right, so someone shared that they're one of the things that they struggle with is finding grants for non-US based organizations. Someone else shared limited information on foundations and their giving priorities available online. Yep, that could definitely be a challenge. And we'll share a interesting kind of statistic, and that is that only 10%, about 10% of foundations actually have websites. So that's definitely one of the reasons why you're having some trouble finding information about funders, but hopefully Foundation Director Online can help you uncover some additional opportunities that you might not be aware of. Locating operational funds, filtering through foundations that are not a good match to find promising opportunities, grant accessibility, having more technical reporting requirements, operating budgets, or complex applications that are manageable for our partners. Yeah, so these are all, definitely challenges that we hear a lot when we're teaching this class. And I'm hoping that after we finish today's class, you will all feel much more comfortable using Foundation Director Online and understanding how you can get the most out of this tool to find funding opportunities for your organization. So thanks so much for sharing in the poll as well as the challenges. All right. So now that you've shared how you're currently searching for funding opportunities and the challenges that you are facing, we're going to kind of take a step back. So before you start searching, you must have a clear idea of the project that you want to fund. It's going to make your research much more focused. Also, you will get a bigger variety of prospects if you can think of different ways to describe your project. So I always recommend that nonprofits break their organization down into as many buckets as possible, so you can try to find funders who are interested in those different buckets. So it may be really tempting to skip this step. Like, oh, I know everything about my organization. I know what needs funding. But it's really important to be able to articulate what you need funding for before doing your research. So you want to ask yourself 3 questions. Who are you serving? Where are they located? And what are you doing for them? So for example, if we have a nonprofit organization that's providing after-school programs for children and youth in Philadelphia, here's how we might answer those questions. For the who are you serving, we might say we're serving youth, kind of a general term, but specifically those ages are 5 to 12. Where are they located? So the work is being done in Philadelphia, so that's where that's the geographic focus. And it's going to be really important that you include a geographic focus when you're searching Foundation Director Online, so that you're getting a list of funders who are specifically interested in funding that geography. And then for the question, what are you doing for them? You might say that you are providing after-school programs with a mix of academic programming, recreation, and cultural activities. So your organization may have one kind of overall program or project that you're looking to get funding for, or you may have several projects. So it's really helpful to be able to answer these questions for each of these programs or projects that you're looking to secure funding for. So to further help you figure out the best search strategy or search terms to use, we're going to take a look at Candid's philanthropy classification system, or taxonomy. So it sounds complicated, but it's really just a list of all the search terms available to you in Foundation Directory Online. So people use different terminology to explain or describe their work. So back to our other example, or our example of after-school programming, you actually won't find after-school programming or after-school as a search term in Foundation Directory Online. Instead, you will use the search term out-of-school learning. Another example is faith-based, which doesn't appear in the taxonomy. Instead, you would pick the religion that's associated with your organization. So when identifying your needs, you should think about these following areas. First, subject, which describes what you need support for. So you can use these terms to describe your organization as a whole, or a specific project or program you're looking to get funding for. So a couple of examples might be elementary education or clean water supply. The population is going to describe who is being supported, who benefits from your programs and services. such as girls or people with disabilities. Support strategy describes how the grant money will support you. So for example, are you looking for general operating? Are you looking for money to renovate a building? In which case you would need capital or infrastructure dollars. The support strategy will help you figure out which funders are interested in providing that specific type of support. So there is a link to the taxonomy in your resource guide, and there's also a worksheet in your resource guide that helps you kind of create your search strategy in Foundation Directory Online. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to open up the taxonomy and show you what that looks like. All right. So the website is taxonomy.candid.org, but again, you do have a link to it in your resource guide. And you can read through this. There's a lot of information about, where these search terms came from, the purpose of the classification system. But for our purposes today, we're going to kind of focus on these different tabs here at the top. So I'm going to start with subjects. And again, subjects describes what work your organization is doing or what you're looking to get funding for. So when I scroll down, we will see a list of search terms. So you'll notice that this initial list is very broad in general, things like health, education, human services. So each of these categories breaks down into more specific search terms though. So for example, we have education. If I click the plus sign next to education, you can see that there's additional more specific search terms contained within that education category. So anytime you see that plus sign, that means there's additional search terms in that category. So for example, if I opened up student services, or no, I'm sorry. If I opened up education services, this is where I would find out of school learning. And if you were unsure what out of school learning or what any of these other search terms meant, you can click on the search term, and then in this box on the right side of the screen, you'll get a definition or a description. So how are they defining this search term? So looking through this list before you even start searching in Foundation Directory Online can be really helpful for figuring out the best search terms to use. And it will save you some time once you're actually in Foundation Directory Online. I also recommend that, for most organizations, you're not just going to use one subject term or one search term to describe your organization's work. So don't expect to just run one search in Foundation Directory Online and that's the final list. You may want to play around with different search terms and see the different search results that you get. So that is subjects. The other section we're going to take a look at is populations. And again, populations describes the who that your organization is working with or who's benefiting from your services. So we have things like age groups, ethnic and racial groups, social and economic status, et cetera. And again, same thing with subjects. We can click the plus sign and we can drill down to find something more specific. So for example, children, you can see that their definition of children is individuals aged 3 to 9 years old. The other section I want to mention is support strategies. So support strategies, again, describes how that grant money can be used. So can it be used for general operating, capital, program development, et cetera. So you can certainly search for funders who are interested in providing general support. I find that this particular search area is a little bit more useful if you're looking for a very specific type of support, like you are doing a capital campaign or you're looking to raise funds for a renovation at your organization, in which case some of these search terms are a little bit more useful than others. But again, you can look through this list and click on any of the search terms to get definitions. So that's the taxonomy, really helpful to look at before you jump into Foundation Directory Online. All right, so I'm going to go back to our presentation now. And if we go back to our example of the after school program I mentioned just a minute ago, I'm going to plug in search terms specifically from the taxonomy. So for the who are you serving, I would say students, children, and preteens, because the children and preteens will get at those specific age groups. So where they are, we're still going to stick with Philadelphia. And then what are you doing for them? I could include out of school learning to capture the general after school programming. I could also maybe search for arts education if we're doing kind of arts and cultural education for these students. And then for kind of the recreation piece of this, I could also try searching for funders interested in funding community recreation. So I always do have a word of caution about the taxonomy and search terms. So a lot of nonprofits tend to think of their work in very granular and specific terms, but funders don't always think along those same lines. So you can certainly start with searching for something very specific, but I would also recommend kind of taking a step back and searching for a broader search term as well. You might find additional funders who are still interested in funding your organization. They just didn't happen to fund something as specific as arts education. So keep in mind that running a search is only part of the research process. Once you have a list of funders, you should evaluate whether or not they are a good fit for your organization or project needs. So you want to ask yourself the following questions that are here on the screen. Do I meet the funder's requirements? So funders are going to have requirements based on where your organization is located, the type of help you're looking for, the size of your organization, your budget. So you want to make sure that you're meeting those requirements. Is your mission or project's goals a priority for that funder? So hopefully using Foundation Director Online can help you get a better sense of what is a priority for that specific funder. How big are the grants they're giving out? So, if you're looking for a grant of $50,000 and you find a funder that looks like a great match, but they're only giving out grants of $5,000, they're probably not going to give you $50,000. So you either need to decide, is it worth your time to pursue this funder and ask for $5,000, or should you move on to the next funder? Does the funder support organizations like mine? So the best indicator of what a funder will fund in the future is what they funded in the past. So looking at the organizations they've supported previously can be a really good indicator of whether or not they would want to fund you. Do I know anyone associated with this particular funder? So it really helps if you know someone at that foundation to help kind of make that introduction, get your foot in the door. So once you have a list of funders that are a great match for your organization, share it with your board, share it with your leadership team, your development team, put it out to your network. Maybe there's some volunteers you work with who know somebody at a particular foundation. It can be really helpful to make that initial connection. So asking these questions for each of the prospects that you come up with can help you evaluate whether or not the funder is a good fit. It's really important to do this piece of the research process because you don't want to waste your time applying for a grant with a funder that isn't a good match. So as I mentioned on the last slide, looking at past grants that a funder has given out can be really useful in determining not only who the funder supports, but also how much they typically give out. So the version of Foundation Director Online I'm going to show you today called Essential doesn't include grant information, but there is another place that you can look for this information, and that is on the funder's 990. So 990s are the financial documents that all nonprofits have to file with the IRS. So you probably all should be familiar with these since you've all filed one for your own organization. But a funder files a different form of 990 called the 990 PF. The PF stands for private foundation. So in addition to financial information and board information, these documents also list out all the grants that that funder gave out during that fiscal year. So the list of grants is found on page 11, but most funders will just add a note that says see attached and then add the full list at the end of the document. So once we get into Foundation Director Online, I will show you what a 990 looks like. and where you can find that grant section. And if you want to learn more about these 990 PFs, I've included a link in your resource guide about kind of the different information in them and how to get the most out of them. All right, so I know I have covered a lot of information about the taxonomy and kind of this research process before you even start to look at Foundation Directory Online. So I'm going to pause here and see if we have any questions. Feel free to put those in the chat. Right, so if no one has any questions, we'll move on. And no worries if you think of anything else, happy to address any questions that come up later on. All right, so now that you've kind of started to think about your funding needs, you can start to explore Foundation Directory Online. So this robust tool is unsurpassed in its scope, depth, and currency. So I listed out some of the stats on Foundation Directory Online here on the page. So you can see there's tons of information on funders, recipients, and grants. And then each funder's profile is going to contain information about their past giving, people associated with the organization, etc. And this, the data in here is updated on a daily basis. So a lot of the information that we're getting for Foundation Directory Online is coming from those 990 PFs I mentioned before, but we're also getting a lot of information from grantmaker websites and annual reports, news articles. And then one of the great things about Foundation Directory Online is that grantmakers have the ability to report their grants details to Foundation Directory Online before their 990 comes out. So when a funder files their 990, it's for the previous year's information, just like when we file our taxes. So the information is kind of already out of date by the time they file it with the IRS, and then it can take several months for those documents to become public. So foundations can go into Foundation Directory Online, update their profile, add additional grant information. So we're going to actually see a lot of information in here from 2021 and 2020. And I'll show you where you can find out when that information was last updated. So do keep these dates in mind so that if you see that a funder's most recent 990 is from 2019, don't think that, oh, I'm missing out on something. That's really, in most cases, just the most up-to-date information that we have. So how can you access Foundation Directory Online? So in addition to accessing FDO through the Regional Foundation Center, there are FIN partners across the globe. So if you find yourself in a new city, or if anyone on today's webinar isn't in the Philadelphia area, you can look to see if there is a FIN location nearby. So you can visit the website learning.candid.org to find a FIN location closest to you. You can also purchase your own subscription to Foundation Directory Online. The price of the subscription varies depending on which version you choose and whether you buy a monthly plan or pay for a year or two in advance. So information about where to find the FIN closest to you, as well as FDO subscription options, are included in your resource guide. So as I briefly mentioned before, there are a couple of different versions of Foundation Directory Online. One is called Professional and one is called Essential. And I've listed out the major differences between the two on the screen here. So if you have visited the Regional Foundation Center, then you've used the Professional version. And the Professional version not only gives you access to funder profiles, but it also gives you access to past grant information as well as recipient information. And when I say past grant information, I'm talking about the grant details about the grants that a funder gave out previously. So you're not actually going to see the actual grants that nonprofits wrote, and you're not going to see a list of grant opportunities. So back in March of 2020, which probably seems like a million years ago to most of us, when things started shutting down, Candid was able to make Essential available to Fins and their patrons. So Essential is a pared down version of Professional. And while it doesn't give you access to past grants or recipient details, it's a really great starting point for researching funders that may want to support your organization. So Essential is available remotely with your free library card. So all Pennsylvania residents can get a free library card for free. And if you don't have one, you can sign up for one online. There's a link to do that in the resource guide. And if you don't live in Pennsylvania, then you can check out Candid Learning to find the Fin location closest to you, or you can reach out to me after today's workshop, and I'm more than happy to get you connected with the Fin location closest to you. So what I find that a lot of people have started doing now that we've reopened is that they'll do some initial searching in the Essential version, get their initial prospect list together, and then they'll come into the Parkway Central Library and then do a deeper dive on their prospect list using the Professional version. So during today's demonstration, I'm going to demonstrate the Essential version, since that's what you all have access to. And like I said, it's a great starting point. But if you'd like to use the Professional version, you're welcome to come into the brick to do so. No appointment necessary. Again, we're open Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I do recommend that you bring your own laptop if you have one, as we have a very limited number of public computers available. So just to give you a quick difference between these two versions, I have two screenshots here of search results. I believe I searched for arts education in Philadelphia. So at the top, we have the search results you would get in Professional. So you can see grant makers, grants, and recipients. But then with the Essential version, you'll see that we just have grant makers, and grants and recipients are grayed out. The number is also a little bit less. So what is not included in here in the Essential version is federal grant makers, international grant makers, and yeah, so not every single foundation is included. But having used both of them pretty extensively, I can say the major players, at least in Philadelphia giving, are represented in the Essential list. So if you've never used Foundation Directory Online Essential before, this might not seem like a change that you need to be aware of. It's just how it is. But you used to be able to have unlimited access to Foundation Directory Online Essential. But earlier this year, they changed that. So what that means is that you can now only access Foundation Directory Online Essential for 24 hours. And then after that 24 hours expires, you can't log in again for 30 days. So I've listed out here some kind of general information about this, and I'm going to go through it in more detail in just a second. But basically, you will need to create a free account on the Foundation Directory Online website. And then once you log in, you can use Essential as much as you want for 24 hours. After that 24 hours expires, you can't log in again for 30 days. And if you do try to log in again before those 30 days is up, you'll get a message saying, telling you the date that you can log in again. So back to my previous point about doing research and planning before jumping into Foundation Directory Online, because you have kind of a finite amount of time that you can be in this database at once, it can be really helpful to figure out your search strategy, figure out which search terms you want to use, and then you can hit the ground running once your day pass starts up. And then after that day pass expires, you can come into the Parkway Central Library and use the Professional version. So I'm just going to briefly go through the process of how to access Foundation Directory Online. However, I did create a video that goes through this step-by-step, and that a link to that video is included in your resource guide. So you're going to go to the Free Libraries website, click on our databases page. You'll look for the nonprofit databases and specifically look for Foundation Directory Online Essential. And then once you click on that, you'll be prompted to enter your free library card number and PIN. And then you'll be taken to the Foundation Director Online website where it will ask you to log in or register. So if you've never registered before, you'll put in your email address, and when you click next, you will be told to check your email, and you'll have to click a link in your email. That email will look like this. So you'll get a link in that email. That link will expire after 30 minutes. So make sure you click it within that 30 minutes. And then you'll be taken to a registration page where you'll just have to include some basic information, name, email address. You have to create a password, etc. And then you'll be able to access Foundation Directory Online. All right. Do we have any questions? I know I've been doing a lot of talking and haven't even showed you Foundation Directory Online yet, but did want to cover some of these things before we jumped into it. So somebody asked if there is a map of fin locations, and there is. I will pull it up. I'm going to show you the Candid Learning website a little bit later on. So I will pull that up and I can show you where you can find those fin locations. Yes, good question. So can you set up a company library card to register with or use your personal card? I do. So the library, I know in the past has allowed organizations to have their own library card. That isn't really going to be tied to the Foundation Directory Online account though. So for the Foundation Directory Online account, you can use your personal email, you can use your work email. Multiple people at your organization can create an account. It's not tied to a specific organization. So if you have 10 people at your organization, they can all sign up for an FDO account and all get access to the 24-hour day pass. You know, you can sign up for an account with your work account and then another account with your personal account if you want. So it's tied to an email address, not to a specific organization. Okay, so what happens once you register for your Foundation Directory Online account, you'll log into Foundation Directory Online and you can use Foundation Directory Online as much as you want for 24 hours. Once that 24 hours expires, you cannot log in again for another 30 days. So the 24 hours is related to how long you have to access Foundation Directory Online. It's not tied to, you asked, are you supposed to register for an account within that 24 hours? No, it's not tied to the registration. It's tied to how long you have to access Foundation Directory Online. Any other questions? It's kind of like a free trial that you can then, re-up every 30 days. So the 24 hours doesn't start as soon as you register. I believe what happens is once you register, it then says, do you want to log in now? And you can say yes if you do. Or if you don't log in, then you can log in at another point, and then your 24 hours will start. So lots of good questions. I know it's a little bit complicated. I definitely recommend watching that video tutorial that explains that process. And the 24 hours cannot be split. It's a 24-hour chunk of time. So once you do log in, the clock starts ticking and it actually will show you a little countdown clock that tells you how much time you have left. All right. So if there's no more questions about the actual process for creating an account or logging in, I'm going to pull up Foundation Directory Online. And if you do have any other questions about the accounts, either today or in the future, please feel free to reach out to me. If you're having any issues, I can do some troubleshooting. If there's an issue that's on Candid's end, I might need to refer you to somebody at Candid, but I'm happy to facilitate that to make sure you do get access. And I'll also show you on the Foundation Directory Online website where you can get help yourself. Okay, so let me pull up Foundation Directory Online. Okay, so we are now on the homepage of Foundation Directory Online. So I am logged into like a dummy account. So I'm not going to go through the whole process of logging in just because it's going to be different for each person. But either way, once you're logged in, this is what you're going to see, the homepage for Foundation Directory Online. So a couple things before we jump into searching. I mentioned that there are some places where you can get help on Foundation Directory Online. So under the help section here, they have an FDO guide. So this is really great to take a look at to kind of get the most out of your searching. You can click on any of these different sections and they have tips and tricks. And then they also have videos as well to show you how to get the most out of searching Foundation Directory Online. So I definitely recommend checking those out. Also under help is the FAQ section. So if you have questions, you can check that out. And then there is also a chat feature. So if you do have questions about your account or anything else, you can chat with somebody at Candid. I believe they're available Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. You're also more than welcome to reach out to the Regional Foundation Center. But if you need something kind of instantaneously, you can try the chat feature. Okay, so on the homepage for Foundation Directory Online, we have in the middle of the page here a quick search. So you can see some of the examples that they've put in this search box: ballet school in New York City, animal shelter in Portland, Maine, food pantry in Dallas. So, recognizing that people are used to using Google and using natural language, you can essentially type whatever you want to into this search box, and then it will try to guess what you're looking for and pair search terms from that taxonomy with what you search for. So you're welcome to start your searching there. I personally think it kind of gives you too many search results. So what I'm going to do is show you the advanced search and filters. So I'm going to click on that link right here above the search box. So then we have these different search boxes, and this is how we can start to build our search. So in our first box here, we have subject area. So what needs funding? So these are the same terms that you'd find on that taxonomy website. And just like on the taxonomy website, we start with very broad general terms. And then anytime you see that little arrow, that means there's additional search terms within that category. So you can either go very specific or you can go with something broader. It's up to you. Again, don't think you're going to run one search and that's it. Play around with the search terms a little bit. So I am going to do out of school learning, just because we've been talking about that after school program. So once I've put a check mark in that box, out of school learning has been added to our search box here. People often ask me if you can search for more than one search term, and you definitely can. So just as an example, if I added reading promotion, which is like literacy, to our search, we now have that in our search box. And you'll also notice that this option appears: match any or match all. So what this is it's essentially an and or search. So if I left this as match any, my search results are going to be any funders interested in out of school learning or reading promotion. If I change this to match all, it's going to show me funders who are interested in all of these search terms. So a funder has to have indicated that they were interested in both out of school learning and reading promotion to show up on our search results. So if you use the match all, you're going to get very specific. So you're going to get less search results. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to remove reading promotion. I just want to stick with out of school learning. So I'm going to click that X to take it out. Next, we have geographic focus. So this is where the work is being done. So for this, you can do a city, a county, a region, or a state. So if your work is exclusively in Philadelphia, you're going to put in Philadelphia. If you serve Philadelphia as well as the surrounding counties, you can put in the Delaware Valley region. If your work is just in Montgomery County, you can put in Montgomery County. I don't recommend putting in Pennsylvania as your geographic focus unless you really are serving the entire state, just because you're going to end up with a lot of funders on your list that only fund Pittsburgh. So I'm going to put in Philadelphia. So I just started typing in Philadelphia. We have the county and the city. They're the same. So you can check either one. It doesn't matter. And just to show you, if I started typing in Delaware, we could also do Delaware Valley region if your geographic focus was the whole region. Next, we have population served. So I know in my example before, I talked about using things like children or preteens or students. So you're certainly welcome to include that in your search. It's a little bit redundant when paired with out of school learning. I found that the population served is really useful if you only serve one very particular population group. So you could even not include a subject area and just include population served. So maybe if you only work with veterans, for example, or people with disabilities, you could include that in your population served and then maybe leave a subject area blank. So I'm going to leave population served blank for now. Next, we have organization name. So you're only going to use this if you are putting in the name of a specific grant maker. In which case you don't have to put anything else in these other search boxes. This is more useful if somebody, maybe your board member said, hey, you should really check out the Philadelphia Foundation. I think they'd be interested in funding us. You could type in the name of the Philadelphia Foundation. I'll show you what that looks like. Just start typing in Philadelphia Foundation. And then you can click on this little arrow here and be taken directly to their profile. Now, location, I always like to explain because people often confuse location with geographic focus. Location is just where a grant maker is physically based. It's essentially what their mailing address is. So a funder may be based in Conshohocken or New York or California, but they may still be interested in funding Philadelphia, in which case they're going to show up on our search results list because we've put in Philadelphia as our geographic focus. But if we put in our location as Philadelphia, we would filter out that funder who's based in Conshohocken or New York or California because they are not located in Philadelphia. So another good example of why you don't want to use location is that a lot of the company-sponsored foundations like Bank of America, TD Charitable, Wells Fargo, they have a presence here in Philadelphia. They have branches, but their headquarters are in other places. So you would end up filtering them out of our search if you use location. So generally speaking, you're not going to use location. You're always going to use geographic focus. And then the who's who box can be useful if you have a name of somebody and you want to see if they are a board member or a staff member at a foundation. You can try searching their name in the who's who box. Under additional filters, I want to point out a couple of things here. So this is where you'll find support strategy. So again, if you are looking for a very specific type of support, like capital and infrastructure, you could include this in your search. I don't recommend always putting something in support strategy. And the reason for that is that when funders are reporting their grants details, they don't always include that piece of information. Or a lot of funders will just say general operating. So sometimes it can be a little bit hard to tease out which funders are actually interested in supporting capital and infrastructure, for example. So certainly, test it out, see if you get some good search results with it. But then I also recommend running a search without including it. I do want to also point out these two sections here, grant amount and years. So these can be helpful if you have a specific dollar amount or range in mind, and you really want to focus in on funders who are interested in providing grants that fall within that range. This can be really helpful if you're looking for funding for like a capital project, so you're looking for maybe larger grants. maybe you want to set your bottom line as $50,000 as an example. So you can either use these slider bars or you can just type something in to these boxes. The years can also be really helpful. So the data in here goes back to 2003. So we're looking at about 18-ish years worth of information. But if a funder gave a grant for out of school learning in Philadelphia in 2003, they're going to still show up on our list. But that was quite a while ago now, so probably not as relevant to us. So you may want to use this years section to look at more recent information. Again, keeping in mind that the data in here may be slightly delayed based on when those 990s came out. So I wouldn't just look at the last year or couple years. I would maybe do like 2015 to 2021. We're not going to worry about these other search boxes for now. They're not particularly useful for people who are just kind of getting started with this. So what you really want to focus on is subject area and geographic focus, sometimes population served, depending on what your organization does. And then as an added bonus, support strategy, grant amount, and years can be useful for building your search as well. All right, so I'm going to click search, and then I'll talk us through our search results. All right, so we have 163 grant makers that meet our search criteria. Again, you'll notice grants and recipients are grayed out, and when you hover over them, it says upgrade now. So if you're on site at the Parkway Central Library using the professional version, you'd be able to look at these results. All right, so the first 5 grant makers that meet our search criteria show up on our list here. But I recommend clicking View All so you can see the full list. And then once you've done that, you'll have this grant makers filters box appear. And within this box, you have the option to exclude grant makers who are not accepting applications. Now, that doesn't mean that they had a deadline of October 5th and that's now passed. Instead, it means that these are funders who pre-select who they're giving to. So either they have, it's a family foundation and they have, their kind of pet projects that they fund over and over again, or it means you need to be invited to apply. So it doesn't mean that those funders are never going to fund you, but it does mean that you can't just send them a grant application. You have to do a little bit more legwork, either seeing if anyone in your network or organization knows somebody there. You can also try sending them a letter of introduction. Maybe ask one of your partner organizations if they've received funding from them and could make an introduction. So if you do want to exclude them from your list, you can do that by checking this box. Some people like to exclude them on their first pass and then go back and look at those funders who aren't accepting applications. So we started with 163 grant makers, and then we dropped down to 78. So we lost more than half, about half of the funders. But we still have a good number of search results to look at. All right, so let me explain now how the information on here is sorted and what it all means. So the first column is telling us the grant maker's name. We can then see the city and state where they're located. The next 2 columns are total assets and total giving. These 2 numbers are coming from the last 990 we have for that particular funder and represents 1 year's worth of financial data for them. So essentially, how much money did they have that year? How much money did they give away? So a lot of people don't realize that foundations are required by the IRS to give away at least 5% of their prior year's assets. So what that means is that a foundation can't decide, oh, the stock market didn't do well or COVID happened, I'm not going to give away any money. They're required to give away at least 5%. Based on the stock market, they may not have as much money to give away, but they still have to give away that 5%. Some foundations give away more than that, but 5% is the minimum. So interesting numbers to note, but in most cases, they're pretty large and not necessarily relevant to us. Instead, we want to look at the next two columns, amount funded and grant count. So that's going to tell us, that's going to tell us how much money and how many grants each of these funders gave to our specific search within the time frame we specified. So if you remember, I put in 2015 to 2021. So within the last 6 years, the Philadelphia Foundation has given out 35 grants for out-of-school learning in Philadelphia, totaling $263,000. So those numbers really give you a sense of how interested or invested that funder is in our specific search. The list is sorted by grant count. So the Philadelphia Foundation gave away the most grants, but you'll notice further down that the Lenfest Foundation gave away more money. So just based on those numbers, I can tell you that the Lenfest Foundation is giving out larger grants than the Philadelphia Foundation is. If you want to resort this list by any of these other headers, you can do so by clicking on any of them. All right, so I'm going to open up the Philadelphia Foundation so I can show you what a funder's profile looks like. So at the top of the page, we can see when their profile was last updated and when their grant information was last updated. So both were fairly recent. You'll also see this symbol, eGrant Reporter. So that's letting us know that this is one of those grant makers who's reporting their grants details to Foundation Directory Online before their 990 is coming out. So just kind of a note about the Philadelphia Foundation. They are our local community foundation. So not only do they provide their own grants, but they also manage a number of funds underneath the umbrella of their organization. So I will say it can be a little hard to tease out just based on their Foundation Directory Online profile, which grants are coming from them versus one of the funds they manage. But the Philadelphia Foundation does have a really great website that explains those different funds in more detail. But either way, it's still helpful to look at their profile. And the first section we're going to take a look at is their last 5 years of giving at a glance. So this is giving us a broad overview of what this funder has supported recently. So the first chart is showing us the top 10 categories they've supported. So out of school learning falls under education. So that's number 2 on their list. So they've given away $29 million to education in the last 5 years. So it's helpful to look at this list, see if there's other subjects that also touch upon what your organization is doing. Are they falling within this top 10 list for this particular funder? Next, we can see where that money is going. So if you're looking at a local funder like the Philadelphia Foundation, this might not be as useful, but if you're looking at a funder who is not based in Philadelphia or Pennsylvania, or who gives nationally, it may be really useful to see how much they've supported the state of Pennsylvania in the last 5 years. And then we talked earlier about how important it is to look at the grant size that a funder typically gives out. And this chart can at least start to give you a sense of what those grant sizes are. So we have different ranges here, and you can see how many grants they gave in these different ranges. So the majority of their grants are less than $5,000, but they're still giving quite a few grants in these other ranges as well. Next, we have funding interest. So these are all the different areas that this funder has supported previously. We have things like subjects and population groups, the type of support strategies. And then if you're unsure of the type of foundation this is, you can look at organization type. And this will tell you, for example, that this is a community foundation. Other types of foundations might be an independent foundation or a company-sponsored foundation. We then have about the funder. So this is kind of like a mission statement or a little bit more about who the funder is and what they support, a little bit of background information. And some funders also have this program areas section, which will list out specific areas of interest for this funder. We then have other funders to consider. So based on similar patterns of giving, these funders may also want to support you. And you can click on any of their names to look at their profiles. We then have application information. So this is probably one of the most important sections to look at because this is where you're going to also find giving limitations. So some people will jump to this application section first before they look at the rest of the profile. And you can do that by just clicking on applications over here on the left-hand side. But this section is going to tell you how you would go about applying for a grant with a funder, any kind of specific documents that you'll have to submit, what the initial approach is. So it's really important to note that not all funders want a full grant proposal right off the bat. Some funders, like this one, want you to complete an online eligibility quiz. You'll also note up here, it says first-time applicant should contact the grant making services department. Some funders will want you to submit an LOI, which is a letter of interest or inquiry. So each funder is a little bit different. So it's really important to note that. You'll also be able to see when the board meets and if there's any specific deadlines. And then, as I mentioned, this giving limitations box. So this is going to give any geographic limitations as well as things that they do not support. So you always want to look at this and make sure nothing counts you out from applying for a grant with a funder. As I said before, don't waste your time applying for a grant with them if it isn't a good match or if you don't meet their specific requirements. We then have their financial information. So I mentioned I'd pull up a 990 for you to see. So you can see we have several years worth of 990s, the most recent one being from 2018. So I'm just going to open that up. So I'm already on the section that lists out the grants details. So you can see this is quite a long document, 383 pages. But we're in the section here that lists out the grants that this grant maker gave out. So we can see who they gave the grant to, how much the grant was for, and then we also have a very brief description about what the grant money was used for. So some are a little bit more specific, like this one says civil dialogue on public issues, but you'll notice that some will just say general operating support. So if you do want to just take a quick look to see what grants a funder has given out and you're not able to come into the library to look at the professional version, this can be really useful in a pinch. All right, so back on the Philadelphia Foundation's profile, the next section is who's who. So I mentioned before that it can be helpful to see if anyone at your organization or network knows anyone at this organization. So this section can help you figure that out. So we have board members as well as staff members. So you can share this list and say, hey, anyone know any of these people? Also in the professional version, they've also included links to people's LinkedIn profiles if they have one. So that's another great way to see if you have any common connections with anyone. We then have the communication section. So I think this is a really fantastic way of getting a better sense of who this funder is, what news articles or press releases are out there about this particular grant maker. So these articles are being pulled from Philanthropy News Digest. So I definitely recommend taking a look at those. You can see a lot of them are very current. The top 3 are just from this this month. Also in this section, if the funder has any social media pages, those will be here. If a funder has a newsletter, which the Philadelphia Foundation does, I highly recommend signing up for it. It's a great way to learn about new funding opportunities. Publications are going to include any kind of issue-related reports that this funder was involved in. So that's coming from another Candid product called Issue Lab. And then at the bottom of the profile is contact information for the funder. So where are they located, phone number, email address, as well as their website. So I do recommend checking the funder's website for the most up-to-date information. The Philadelphia Foundation has a wonderful website, lots of great information. But as I mentioned earlier, only about 10% of foundations do have websites. So especially for those like smaller family foundations, they're probably not going to have much of an online presence. So that's why using Foundation Director Online can be really helpful for starting this research process. So I do want to just briefly show you how you can kind of save information that you found in Foundation Director Online, and then I'll answer any questions that came up during the demonstration. So back at the top of the funder's profile, you will see this little tools box here. And in this tools box, there are multiple ways to save this information. So you can download a PDF version of this profile to save right to your own computer, or Google Drive or Flash Drive, whatever you use. You can do that. And then you can access that PDF anytime you want. You don't have to be logged into Foundation Director Online. You can email yourself or anyone else a PDF version of this profile. You can also hit this star and save it to your favorites. So then the next time you log into your Essential account, it will show up in your favorites. Another thing that's kind of cool is you can set an alert for this particular funder. So what will happen is once you check this box, if there have been any updates to the profile for this particular grant maker, then you'll get an email letting you know that. So that's if you want to save the information for one profile. If I hit the back button on our browser and go back to our search results, you'll see we have a tools box on this page as well. And we can also kind of do the same thing. We can do save PDF, a spreadsheet, or email. In this case, since we're on the search results page, we can do more than one at a time though. So if you want to save the profiles for grant makers, you can do up to 10 at a time. So you can check the boxes next to the, the first 10 that you want. I'm just kind of picking randomly here. And then you would hit either PDF or email. And then you want to make sure you're selecting save profiles. So you'll get all that information we just looked at for each of the funders you selected. If you would like a spreadsheet of all of these funders on the list, you can also do that. So for that, you can do 100 at a time. So you can just click this select all box. We only have 78 on our list. And then you can hit this spreadsheet button and it will download a spreadsheet of all the funders and the information that's on the page here. So a few different ways that you can save information in Foundation Director Online. So even after that day pass expires, you can still access these profiles if you've saved them to your computer. All right, so I know that we've covered a lot of information in Foundation Director Online. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put those in the chat box. So yeah, just as a reminder, you do not need an appointment to use Foundation Director Online Professional at the Parkway Central Library. Just come in anytime, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Again, I do recommend bringing your own laptop just because we only have a few public computers available. So then once you connect to our Wi-Fi, you can stay as long as you'd like. You do have to wear a mask in the library, just a heads up on that. And we do keep a guidebook at the reference desk as well. So if you need a little refresher on how to access Foundation Director Online or run a search, then you can grab that. That guidebook. Any other questions? So somebody asked for the professional version, how does the database update for tracking the individual grants? So those are either being pulled from the 990s. So that information I showed you before, they have computers that are data mining all of those IRS documents, or a funder can use this tool called the Updater, where they can upload their own information about the grants that they've given out. Good question. Is the professional version better to search for international donors or US donors who give internationally? So the professional version is going to include international information, which this, so the essential version is only going to include US-based organizations that give internationally. It's not going to include international foundations that give internationally. So yeah, for any kind of international organizations, I definitely recommend using the professional version. So the professional version is available at the Parkway Central Library. Let me actually kind of ties into this next section, the Candid Learning website. So if you are not in Philadelphia and you want to find another place where you can access Foundation Directory Online Professional, you can go to learning.candid.org and click on this button here, find Candid near me, and you can enter your city or your zip code. I just put in Philadelphia, and it's going to show you funding information, network locations closest to you. So we are the only location in Philadelphia, but the surrounding counties also have a few locations. So Montgomery County Community College, the Grundy Library in Bristol, Chester County Library. If there's anyone here who's in New Jersey, the New Jersey State Library also provides access. But we are the Parkway Central Library is the only location in Philadelphia that provides access to professional. You're also welcome to subscribe yourself. As I mentioned, the price for that depends on, are you paying for a monthly subscription, yearly subscription? Are you purchasing the essential version or the professional version? And there's information again in your resource guide about that. And while we're on the Candid Learning website, I just want to point out a couple of things here that might be useful to all of you. So Candid Learning has a lot of really great learning opportunities. So under this training section, you can see a list of all of their upcoming workshops. Some have a fee associated with them, but some are free. Also on Candid Learning, under resources, they have a knowledge base, which is like an FAQ section. They also have sample documents. So if you want to see what a good grant proposal looks like or a good project budget looks like, then you can take a look at these sample documents. You can actually read the full document, and you'll also be able to see comments from the funder as to why it was a successful grant proposal or budget or whatever type of document it is. So really great website for kind of all of your nonprofit information needs. All right, so I just have a couple more slides that I want to show you, and then we can go over any other questions. I'll give people a chance to unmute. We can go from there. So I think I kind of touched on some of this stuff already. So if you do need help with anything related to Foundation Directory Online, there's that FDO guide section right on the Foundation Directory Online website, and they have links to articles and YouTube videos. You're also more than welcome to reach out to the Regional Foundation Center. We are more than happy to help you, or you can use that chat feature to chat with staff at Candid. So I already kind of talked about Candid Learning. For anyone who was previously familiar with GrantSpace is now Candid Learning. So they updated the look of it and changed the name of it. And then if anyone is interested in learning more and building upon their knowledge, you can either come to our live introduction to fundraising planning class next week, or you can check out the resources from a recording of Candid's version of it. You can also check out Intro to Finding Grants. So our contact information is there. Jillian's going to put a link in the chat to a program evaluation. We'd love to hear your feedback. And then sometime this afternoon, most likely, I will be sending out a link to the recording as well as a link to the resource guide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the recording and then give people a chance to unmute and answer any other questions that people have.